Chiare Devantes. I'm Luke Ranieri, and I'm here with my friend and colleague Raphael Turrigiano.
Hi there.
And this channel is Polymathy. Today, Raph and I are going to tell you about what we believe is an optimal pronunciation convention for Ancient Greek and why you might consider adopting it.
This video has two parts. In the first part, we'll tell you about the sounds of Lucian Koine Pronunciation and how they work in context. In the second part, we'll explain how we developed this new balanced convention and why we recommend it for Ancient Greek.
There'll be timestamps in the description to take you directly to certain parts of the video. Also, this video will have a lot of linguistic terminology and international phonetic alphabet symbols to help us clearly explain these sounds. And if you're unfamiliar, don't worry too much about those. We'll be pronouncing everything we're talking about so you don't feel lost. Part 1. The sounds of Lucian pronunciation. The phonology of Lucian pronunciation is derived from the sounds found in Ancient Greek from about the 2nd century AD.
Most Lucian pronunciation vowel qualities are the same as in modern Greek. A, as in auknos, a. E, as in echo, e. I, as in isos, I. O, as in opos, o. Ancient Greek also has the sound U, as in lykos, U. This is the same as I, except it's pronounced with the lips rounded. U, lykos.
Those are the short vowels. There are also long vowels. Long vowels have the same quality or basic sound as the short vowels, but they have a longer duration. A, agan, e, ete, I, ipon. And spelled differently but pronounced the same. I, apokrinetai. O, gome. U, udamos. U, viknumi.
The Lucian pronunciation also has two true diphthongs, I as in korai and öi as in öimöi. The first of these you can think of as a transition between a and e. I, korai. The second of these is a transition from to u, öi, öimöi. Just as how u is the rounded version of I, is the rounded version of e. However, if it's easier for you, you can think of this instead as a transition from e to u, because your lips will naturally round for the e as you're transitioning into the u.
Prior to the 1st century BC, Ancient Greek had long diphthongs, marked by the Iota-Subscript, but these merged with plain long monophthong vowels. A, ado, e, lestes, o, como dia. The aspirate is the name for the sound of English H, h. Pronounce this sound in the beginning of a word in isolation or at the beginning of a sentence only. All other places in a sentence, it should tend to go silent.
As in modern Greek, sigma and zeta are retracted because Greek of all periods lacks a postalveolar fricative, the sh sound. Thus we should be saying s and z and not s and z or sh and j. So, for example, sukizo, sukizo, zeti, zeti. If your language contains both s and sh, as in English or Italian, you can find the sound by either retracting your tongue from your normal s or pushing it forward from your normal sh, because the tongue position is basically directly in between these two sounds. If your native language is Greek, European Spanish, Finnish, etc., then this sound should come quite naturally. Also, please note that zeta is always geminated, meaning it's doubled in duration. So we want to say sukizo and not sukizo.
Delta and theta are dental fricatives, as in modern Greek. Didomi, thelo.
Gamma and hi are also pronounced as in modern Greek. In front of back vowels, they are the velar fricatives g and ch. You can get these sounds by pronouncing a g and a k and feeling where your tongue contacts the roof of your mouth, but then instead of making it fully touch the roof of your mouth, just bring it close enough to create friction. In the same way that when we say f, our lip is close enough to our teeth to produce friction, but we're not saying p, we're not making a stop sound, right? So take your g and go g, gamma, or ch, 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 right? So we should be saying, for example, Galatia, Gavros, Gonis, Gun, Chamae, Chavon, Chortos, Echusin. But before front vowels, as in e, I, u, they move forward into the palate, which is called palatalization, a key feature of both modern Greek and Koine. For example, ye, yaya, yauma, yilos, yei, yups, hieresin, echis, hyaire, hyoira, hyudan. Thus, gamma is either g or y, and hi is either ch or hy.
Gamma is also used sometimes for the velar nasal, ananke, and when geminated, the double gamma can be anga or palatalized, ange. The second component is not a fricative, and this is just as in modern Greek, angelos.
Palatalization also occurs for kappa. Compare galos and genos. So kappa can either be pronounced ka or ke. The following letters sound pretty much as expected. Tau as in tetra, pi as in pappos, ro as in ara or errosto, lambda as in lallai, mu as in mamia, and nu as in nai. Make sure that tau, pi, and kappa are not aspirated at the beginning of a word, thus tetra and not tetra, or pappos and not pappos. Ro should be a tap when between vowels, and it should be a trill when it is doubled or at the beginning of a word. Thus, we should be saying ara and not arra, or errosto and not erosto. Note also that doubled consonants are fully pronounced, as in Cypriot Greek. So we should be saying tetra and not tetara, or lallai and not lallai. Phi and veta are fricatives, but not exactly as in modern Greek. In the Lucian pronunciation, these are bilabial fricatives, meaning that they are made with the lips alone as opposed to the lips and teeth. So we should have fa and va as opposed to fa and va. Philosophos, vivlia. Finally, we have the two false diphthongs. These consist of a vowel followed by a bilabial fricative. Ideally, the bilabial fricative component should be rounded, making this truly the intermediate point between the Attic au or eu and the modern Greek av or af and ev or ef. Thus, we should have au or au and eu or eu. Autos, aurion, eutropos, eugenia.
So to summarize some of the key features of Lucian pronunciation, we have fricatives for gamma, delta, veta, chi, theta, and phi. And of course, the veta and the phi are a little bit different from the modern pronunciation. They are bilabial fricatives, va and fa, unlike their modern equivalents, va and fa. And we chose that for historical reasons, and also because if you want to have certain features of the language, you have to give up others. For example, if you want to actually render these in the modern version, for example, if you want the modern version of fa for, say, philosophos, which is pretty much the modern word, then you also have to have va for vivlia, for example. It has to be the labiodental for both. Now, if you do that, it also means you have to have another version. And we can call this the evolved version, where we have a fa for phi, va for veta. But that means words like autos, which means self or he, has to be aftos, as in the modern pronunciation. And also the eu has to be ev or f. So evgenia, it can't be eugenia. So if you really like a particular sound, for example, if you really, really like that modern sound of fa for phi, then you can have it, but it means you have to change the au to av and the eu to ev as well. And you must also have the veta as veta. It may not be the occlusive b sound, because these changes happened in a certain order. If instead, though, you'd like something a little bit more archaic sounding, which is certainly plausible also for the time period that we're talking about, and you really like the ow and the ao sounds instead of the ow and the ow, which have that bilabial fricative component in them in the standard Lucian pronunciation, well, that's fine. But then you also have to have the aspirates for he as ki, and instead of theta, theta, and instead of phi as p. Pitch accent is also a feature of Lucian pronunciation, and in future videos I'll talk about pitch accent in Greek. The Lucian pronunciation of ancient Greek is based on my research into the changing phonologies of Latin and Greek through the millennia, which I've conducted with the welcome assistance of Raphael Turrigiano as well as Stefano Vittori. I've summarized many of these changes on my spreadsheet, which is available to anyone online, and it's called Ranieri's Greek Pronunciation Chronology, and I'll put the link in the description. And also I'll put in the description my video where I give a presentation at Living Latin and Ancient Greek in New York, and that's on my other channel, Scorpio Martianus.
Yeah, thanks for putting my name in tiny, tiny letters on the last slide.
They weren't that tiny, and it was the antepenultimate slide.
Uh-huh.
Previously, I was calling this system Imperial Roman Koine Greek pronunciation to distinguish it from the post-Attic Koine heard by Latin speakers during the Roman Republic. And my Imperial Roman Koine system had a somewhat free attitude toward the various possibilities that could have existed, and I became a bit obsessed with permissiveness, as an antidote to my previous restrictiveness. I'd mentioned in a previous video that the dominant pronunciation, for example, the letter he, ought to have been a k, even through the end of antiquity. And while I still believe that's at least the pronunciation of some Greek speakers, my research now seems to show me that there were plenty of speakers who were evolving that sound into something more like the modern pronunciation. In fact, either might have been the dominant pronunciation, which leads me to recommend what we've talked about today.
Yeah, and Luke was on the right track with the convention he was developing, but since then we've limited some of the variations and grouped them together in a way that made more synchronic linguistic sense. For example, in Lucian pronunciation, you can have the labiodental fricative f for phi, but then you also have to have aftos, since this sound shift would have happened for any group of speakers at the same time. So, if you want to say autos, that's permissible in Lucian pronunciation as a more archaic variant, but then you have to keep the letter phi, the aspirated occlusive p.
My goal for the Lucian pronunciation of ancient Greek, which is named after 2nd century AD author Lucian, or Λουκιανός, who may have used a pronunciation system very much like this one, was to prescribe a more useful Koine pronunciation system than that espoused by Randall Buth, for whom, by the way, I have the utmost respect, as well as all those who use Buth's system. Buth recommends a highly evolved phonology, with all diphthongs monophthongized, and phonemic vowel length and geminated consonants, as well as pitch accent, disregarded. Yet these features, although decidedly more conservative, are tested to exist well through the Roman Empire, and geminated consonants still exist in Cypriot Greek today. The Lucian pronunciation retains these characteristics because they are crucial to the literature. Oddly, Buth doesn't prescribe the palatalization of velars before front vowels, a key feature of most historical Koine, as well as modern Greek. By having the palatalization of velars before front vowels, the Lucian pronunciation often can sound much closer to modern Greek than Buth's system, and is also more historically accurate. That's a win-win.
Now, not only is ancient Greek a tremendously vast beast diachronically, stretching from epic Homer in the 8th century BC to the end of antiquity around the 5th century AD, but also diatopically as the tongue of all the varied regions of the Eastern Roman Empire, and in Greek colonies in southern Italy and as far west as Spain. Koine is somewhat more strictly defined as the language of the Hellenistic period through the fall of the Western Roman Empire, but that's still a huge period of at least 6 centuries.
So the Lucian pronunciation is an attempt to bridge the gap between the sound of modern Greek and the systems of spoken ancient Greek that others have become accustomed to, but are not historically valid, namely Erasmian. Part 2, Methodology. Our friend Lokan Kirpela, whose YouTube channel, Manel Makar, you should check out, wisely said that the reconstruction of historical pronunciation of a language is a delicately balanced convention formed by the intersection of 4 factors: science plus art plus pedagogy plus politics.
The first component, science, refers to the historical accuracy knowable based on as much direct evidence as possible, such as first-person accounts of ancient grammarians, spelling errors and other inscriptional data, as well as what can be inferred through the rigors of historical linguistics, working backwards from the modern dialects of Greek. However, the people using ancient Greek every day are by and large not historical linguists. The reconstruction of a historical pronunciation for regular use by modern speakers must start here, but it may not end here.
The problem can arise that the inherent uncertainties of the linguistic process offer more than one plausible outcome. Perhaps just one version is the only right one for a given time and place, or perhaps the others coexisted with it. The differences could be diachronic, variance through time, diatopic, variance over geographical areas, diastratic, variance according to different social groups, or diaphasic, variance according to style or register. And with insufficient scientific data from which to draw a clear conclusion, as is the case with certain aspects of ancient Greek, aesthetic concerns come into play. This is the shaping of our convention using art as a legitimate augment to the science. That is, a way to make decisions. We grant that aesthetic preferences are subjective, but they do matter.
What we ultimately want is that aesthetic choices are made in reference to a universal default model, such that while there is diversity in pronunciation, that diversity centers around a shared standard that is scientifically and pedagogically sound, rather than a complete free-for-all. Additionally, we believe that this standard will make it easier for people to make the aesthetic choices that work best for them. For instance, many people may like aspects of the Attic reconstruction and aspects of the modern pronunciation, but not know how to reconcile the two in a coherent manner. If you like our system, we encourage you to follow it, but we also grant you may want to make archaicizing or innovative modifications according to your preferences.
Pedagogical concerns are important as well. Certain pronunciation features may inhibit the ability to teach or learn the language, either due to the native language of the speakers or other factors. Moreover, the goals of most teachers and students are best served by a pronunciation that functions for the literature. Most learners will want to use their Greek to access a wide range of texts, and this means choosing a pronunciation which fits naturally the meter of poems, the ancient melodies, and thus also provides a chance to capture the authentic feel of the language as it may have existed in the minds of its native speakers. And political aspects are necessary to think about too, such as potential acceptance by or comprehensibility for the established community of ancient Greek speakers, as well as the living population of modern Greek speakers. Our pronunciation system should, with a bit of adjustment, be just as comprehensible to a modern Greek as it is to an emulator of reconstructed Attic. Together, these determine the viability of pronunciation conventions. This quadrivium, science plus art plus pedagogy plus politics, applies in the following manner to the prescriptions of the Lucian pronunciation of ancient Greek.
By far the majority of our prescriptions are based on linguistic and philological science. The evolving fricative nature of β during the 1st century AD, for example, has been well established by Horrocks and Booth, among others. But what kind of fricative? Labiodental or bilabial? Earlier, we showed you a few alternative systems. For example, if you want to pronounce phi as f, that's fine and reasonable for early Roman imperial Koine, but you have to then pronounce β as v, and the false diphthongs as av and ev as well. And if you want to pronounce av and ev in their older forms, au and eu, then phi must be p. You can't have both au and eu as well as fricative f for phi. The linguistic constraints demand one of these sets be chosen.
That's why we've prescribed phi and β as the bilabial fricatives fa and va, and alpha plus upsilon as auv or auf, and epsilon upsilon as euv or euf. Not only is this historically plausible, even likely in this period, we find these sounds aesthetically pleasing. Additionally, the combination of rounding and frication makes it comprehensible to users of both true diphthongs and the modern fricative values. Another aspect where art has a profound influence on our decision-making is in ancient Greek literature, namely poetry. Booth has adequately demonstrated that many Greek speakers were losing phonemic vowel length as well as pitch accent during the latter Koine period. However, losing does not mean completely lost for all speakers, particularly when these changes could be diastratic or diatopic. Koine poetry and songs unto the end of antiquity demonstrate beyond a shadow of a doubt that pitch accent and phonemic vowel length were as essential as ever. Therefore, in order to appreciate the aesthetic beauty of these works, intuitive knowledge of long and short vowels, as well as pitch accent, is most vital, and that intuition is best cultivated through everyday speech. We believe the challenges of learning pitch accent, however, may be mitigated by allowing stress accent to accompany the pitch accent, which was doubtless a transitional pronunciation system of Koine.
This decision has a pedagogical element as well. By going through the effort to learn phonemic vowel length along with the geminated consonants, one becomes a better speller and notices conjugation and declension more readily. Additionally, correct recitation of ancient Greek poetic meter is naturally a skill many would like to acquire. Accurately pronouncing long and short consonants and vowels will make the vast majority of meter effortless. Pedagogical concerns also temper certain linguistically sound concepts. For instance, in this period, the dominant pronunciation for the aspirated stops may well have been affricates. That is, instead of ka, ta, pa, or cha, tha, fa, we may have had ka, tha, and pa. But these have the disadvantage of not being easily pronounced with the necessary precision by most people interested in ancient Greek, namely speakers of Western European languages, although we by no means discourage attempting them. This is also true of the aspirated pronunciations of ka, ta, pa, which, while we believe it is a plausible variety extant throughout all of Koine, perhaps even the dominant pronunciation, the aspirated consonants are not sufficiently clearly understood by European language speakers today, and most are very bad at distinguishing them from unaspirated consonants, and so we have deemed them as not worth prescribing for our main system for Lucian Koine, and just as an alternative.
Another pedagogical choice has to do with whether the aspirate h is retained. This sound behaves quite the same in the contemporary Latin of the period as it does in the ancient Greek, and grammarians assert that this sound exists in both languages well into the Roman Empire. Yet we have plenty of inscriptional and evolutionary evidence that it is vanishing everywhere. Thus, I recommend it be pronounced at the beginning of a word in isolation, again this is a pedagogical decision, or at the beginning of a sentence, but internal to a sentence it should tend to go silent. This is the same practice I use when I speak Latin, and the results have been quite good. Meanwhile, Raph prefers not to pronounce the aspirate h, as he believes that speakers with fricative ch would probably already have lost this sound. Politics are unavoidable, even in historical phonological debates. There are two main political concerns relevant to this discussion, and the first has to do with whether or not it is legitimate to even revive an ancient language like Koine Greek to be spoken on a daily basis. As ancient Greek has already been revived successfully and continues to enjoy the sixth Renaissance, as Christophe Rico calls it, we'll leave this aside. The other political factor has to do with broad acceptance and usage, especially for the modern inhabitants of the countries of origin. Raphael and I have found that the restored classical pronunciation of Latin is, not surprisingly, generally unpopular with Italians, who are most familiar with the ecclesiastical Italian pronunciation of Latin. However, this appears to be part euphony, part cultural. The restored classical pronunciation of Latin is most often associated with Germans and Anglophones who speak Latin. The vast majority of Germanic language speakers have very un-Latin intonation, vowel placement, and attention to consonant articulation, generally using their native phonologies with little regard for the finer details.
Since Luke and I both speak several Romance languages and attempt to use much of Romance phonology and intonation, where applicable, in our spoken Latin, the Italians we speak with tend to find our pronunciation sufficiently pleasant as to be acceptable to their ears. So the main reasons that Italians tend to disdain what they think is restored classical Latin pronunciation is not because we say cena instead of cena, but because an English speaker might tend to say cana.
To that end, Raph and I strongly encourage ancient Greek speakers to at least study basic modern Greek phonology, if not just learn the language to fluency, and to listen to modern Greeks speaking Greek, imitating their intonation, prosody, and whatever sounds that are common to both Lucian pronunciation and modern Greek. We'll provide a playlist of videos of modern Greek speakers in the description for you to enjoy.
We also recommend the same for Latin. Listen to Romance speakers and imitate whatever is appropriate for classical Latin. Luke and Stefano Vittori had a nice long talk about that in Latin in a 6-episode podcast series, link in the description.
We've observed that many involved in the theory and practice of historical phonology, often, perhaps even unknowingly, rest upon one of the latter three of the quadrivium, namely art, pedagogy, or politics, while spuriously invoking linguistic science as justification. For example, we've known some Greeks who assert that many, if not all aspects of modern Greek phonology date back even as far as Homer, And these folks seem to want to use a tortured version of historical data to make their aesthetic preference more legitimate. But that's just not necessary. A pronunciation doesn't have to be historically verifiable to be a legitimate practice. There's nothing wrong with a Greek person today preferring to recite ancient Greek literature with the same sounds heard in today's Δημοτική, just as there is nothing wrong with an Italian wanting to recite Latin in the ecclesiastical pronunciation, if for no other reason than it's more pedagogically convenient for them, and aesthetically what they're used to. So speaking about these motivations honestly, rather than hiding behind a guise of facts, is key. As another example, the Erasmian pronunciation is demonstrably inappropriate as an historical reconstruction of any era of ancient Greek to do its imbalanced restoration of various phonemes. However, we fully accept that someone may prefer it, or any other standard, and we urge these people to say honestly that this is simply because they are accustomed to it.
The Lucian pronunciation system, then, can act as a binding glue between the most common systems in use: classical, Erasmian, late Koine, and modern. Since it has similarities with all of these systems, it increases the mutual comprehensibility of everyone, while still managing to be both historically plausible and promoting an atmosphere of tolerance, since it has both internal variation and is also compatible with other pronunciation systems.
Raph and I hope for the Lucian pronunciation to grow to be a conventional pronunciation through which ancient Greek literature of any century can be enjoyed. Thanks very much for watching, subscribing, and sharing this video. Eroste!